since you mentioned illiteracy from, 150 years ago, let me ask you about affirmative action. You wrote a book on the topic titled For Discrimination, Race, Affirmative Action, and the Law. First, what is affirmative action?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we could talk about what your view is on it today.
Sure. Well, affirmative action refers to racial affirmative action, because there's various sorts of affirmative action. I mean, you can have affirmative action for veterans. You can have affirmative action for in-state residents. Let's suppose you have a school, the University of, blah blah blah, and we're gonna reach out a hand to help the people who live within this state. We're going to have a boost for veterans. We're going to have a boost for women. We're going to have a boost for men in certain circumstances. Well, we're the type of affirmative action that gets most attention, and that's worth noting as well. There are lots of different sorts of affirmative action, but when you say affirmative action, the type of affirmative action that immediately people are thinking about is racial affirmative.
Seems like race is at the core of this American experiment that we're part of in every part of its culture.
Bingo. Why is it that, there's various ways in which institutions reach out to help various sectors of our population. Why is it that this is the one that generates all of the pulling out of hair and gnashing of teeth? We can put that to the side for a moment. Racial affirmative action refers to efforts in which institutions reach out to provide assistance to racial minorities. Now, the reaching out can happen in different ways. A light form of affirmative action might be reaching out in terms of recruiting, making a special effort to make sure that young people, let's say in racial minority neighborhoods, know about your college. That's recruitment. On the other hand, racial affirmative action might take more, might take a stronger form. It might take the form of saying, okay, we have a competition, and we think that there will be too few racial minority kids who do well enough in this competition to be admitted to our school. So what we're going to do is we are going to in various ways, give a boost to the minority kids. If it comes down to you have two kids, they both, have, 99 on the test. There's one place left. We only have one spot left. Two kids. One's a black kid, one's a white kid. They both got 99. We're going to give it to the black kid. Why? Well, black kid. All there is to it. The black kid, we want to, maybe, and then our theory, maybe our theory is that black people have been done wrong in the United States, and we want our institution to contribute to making amends. That might be a theory. Another theory might be, we think that we'll have a more interesting student body, we'll have a better student body, a more, better discussion if there are more black kids on campus. And unless we make a special effort to bring more black kids on campus, our student body will be overwhelmingly monoracial. We'll just have, white kids, a few Asian kids, a few Latino kids. If there are no black kids here, I don't know, it'll be lacking an important aspect of American life. So that's some sort of, the so-called diversity story. So there are various theories Some are grounded, like I said, in reparative justice. Some might be grounded in distributive justice. So, for instance, when people say nowadays, we want a cabinet, we want a team, we want a student body that looks like America. That might be a distributive justice theory for why you want affirmative action, unless we reach out and give a boost to certain groups, they won't be here. And we want a campus that looks like America. And we won't have a campus that looks like America unless we give a special boost to, I don't know, the Latino kids, or unless we give a special boost to Black applicants. So reparative justice, distributive justice, or third, diversity. We just want to have an interesting student body, and to have an interesting student body, we want, kids from a wide array of places. We think that that'll make for a better campus, more interesting campus. Those are three justifications, all of which, however, are justifications for, in a competition, giving a special boost to some people based on their race.
So what's your sense? Can you make the case for affirmative action, and can you make the case against it?
Yeah, I can make the case for, and I can make the case against. The case for, I won't spend much time on this. Like I said, there are three main justifications. Your audience should know that the justification that actually led to affirmative action is a justification that you don't hear about in the courts, because the courts have said that that justification is insufficient. So the real justification behind affirmative action was, in the late 1960s, in the aftermath of the Civil Rights Revolution, in the aftermath of the Civil Rights Movement, there was a feeling that, well, okay, fine, we're not discriminating against Black people anymore, but Black people have been disadvantaged by the discrimination that has been put upon them. And this discrimination that was put upon them has disabled them. And so they go into competitions, and it's unfair. Yeah, they score less well on the standardized tests, but, surprise, surprise, what the heck? They went to schools in which they got the leavings of the white folks. The white folks gave the Black folks the old textbooks. That's what the Black kids read. The white kids read the newest textbooks, on and on and on. So reparative justice. We're going to try to repair the scars left by past racial injustice. And so it's sort of an effort to overcome the vestiges of past misdeeds. That was one justification for affirmative action. And frankly, I think that's the justification that has always been the predominant justification, whether people owned up to it or not. But that's one justification. The distributive justice justification is there. Like I say, we want an integrated America. We want an America that looks like America. In that justification, legitimacy is sometimes mentioned. So, for instance, people will say things like, well, if we're in the armed forces, you can't have an armed forces in which the people on the ground you have a lot of people on the ground who are people of color, but none of the people calling the shots, none of the generals, none of the colonels are people of color. No, the people on the ground are not going to stand for that. So for purposes of legitimation, we need to, for purposes of buy-in, we need to have a situation in which people get the sense that even if they're sort of low down, they're still part of the story. They're part of the team. So that's part of the sort of I don't know, distributive justice notion.
Do you think there's power to that? I mean, do you think there's value, there's correctness to that kind of idea?
I think there's some.
Because for the application process for different universities, I think that there's probably a driving narrative, the justification for well, affirmative action. I don't know where we put DEI efforts because they overlap, but they're not perfectly overlapping.
The reason that the school, so yeah, as you know, there is a case. We'll know about it. It'll be announced sometime in the next month. Month and a half. It's a case at the Supreme Court of the United States in which the affirmative action program at Harvard and the affirmative action program at the University of North Carolina are being challenged. Most people think, including me, that the Supreme Court of the United States is going to limit, if not totally seek to abolish affirmative action. So this is a very burning issue. As things currently stand, my university and other universities embrace affirmative action on the third ground, the diversity ground. And what they say is, we need affirmative action because affirmative action is good for pedagogical reasons. Now, frankly, do I think there's something to that? I think there's a little something to that with respect to some subjects. I don't think that's what's really going on for the most part. I mean, if that's what's really going on, why don't we have more foreign students? Why isn't there a greater effort to bring in more foreign students? Why isn't there a greater effort to bring in more, I don't know, religious fundamentalists? Why isn't there a greater effort to bring in, and you could just name various groups that are, you hardly ever see them on campus.
So you don't think this kind of effort of driving towards diversity is rigorous enough?
I think it's often pretextual. I think, frankly, the real reason has to do with the belief, and I think it's a good belief. I associate myself with the belief. It's just that because of the legal rules, the authorities can't say this belief out loud, but it's still the case that a lot of institutions want to help American society overcome its racial past. That's the real animating force. Now, this thing about, we'll have better classroom discussions, some discussions. I mean, with some subjects, listen, I'm an ignoramus when it comes to physics. My sense of it is, however, that if you're talking about physics, you're talking about physics, and frankly, it doesn't much matter in terms of mastering physics what the demographics of that classroom are like. You either know physics or you don't.
The interesting thing I've noticed since doing this podcast is one way it does matter. It's really lonely when you do a thing and you don't see somebody that looks like you doing that thing.
Okay.
And it's such a seemingly stupid thing. Why does it matter if there's another person that looks like you in this very shallow sense? But it seems to matter to people. And when I talk to, for example, women on this podcast, a lot of women reach out saying how inspiring that is. And that's interesting, right? Like, I think we're still human and we see people that look like us. And this kind of narrow, shallow definition of diversity still matters.
Okay. Well, I think you've made a good point, and maybe so. So let's go back to the physics. I mean, let's suppose that under one scenario, there's a classroom and a kid sticks his head in, a black kid sticks his head in the classroom and doesn't see anybody else black there, and has to make a quick decision and says, nah, this ain't for me. Versus they stick their head in the classroom, they see a smattering of other black people in the classroom, they say, let me try this. And then they try it, and it turns out, damn it, they're, Albert Einstein. So, to that extent, I can see, under that scenario, maybe it does matter. So, I'll have to recalibrate. Still, those are the three leading justifications for affirmative action. You ask me, where do I stand with respect to affirmative action? Oh, no. Before we get to that, are there criticisms? The answer is yes. There are criticisms of affirmative action. Affirmative action is a policy like, any policy. Any policy is going to have some downsides to it. And affirmative action is no different. Does affirmative action have some downsides? Yes, it does have some downsides. What are they? Well, let me mention a couple. One, stigma. Stigma. So if you have an institution that says that it reaches out to give a boost to certain people on a racial basis, there are going to be people who observe that and who are going to be thinking to themselves, if so-and-so is here and they were given a special boost, doesn't that mean that they were not as proficient as the other people who are here and who did not have that boost? So if they are not as proficient, that means that they might not be as good. They might not be as up to snuff. Is that part of our affirmative action world? Yes, it's part of our affirmative action world. Yes. I'm a professor at Harvard Law School. One of the subjects I teach is contracts. Actually, that's probably the subject I most enjoy teaching. I think I most enjoy writing about racial conflict and the legal system. But as far as teaching, I most enjoy teaching contracts. Well, on the very first day, when 80 students come, they're especially first year students, they're nervous. I show up. I'm quite sure that there's some students there who are thinking, okay, well, is this guy as good as my other teachers? Because, I know that, institutions like Harvard have made a special effort to bring in people like this guy, Kennedy. Is he as good? Well, I'm sorry. If you have an affirmative action regime, people are going to think that. And are they crazy to think that? No, they're not crazy to think that. No, that's a perfectly logical thing for somebody to think. Does it have an effect on me as the teacher? Yeah, actually, it does have an effect on me. Sure. I'm aware that some people are thinking that. It doesn't. I'm not. It doesn't. It doesn't. Make me shake in my boots. Am I aware of it? Yeah, I'm aware of it. Does it have an effect? Yeah, it probably does have an effect. It probably does. It probably makes me redouble my efforts because I don't want anybody to think justifiably that I'm less able than my colleagues. So, it's funny. When I was growing up, my father used to tell me over and over again, Randy, tie, you lose. Okay, brother, let me just tell you that. And he was telling me that because when he was, in an earlier time, tie, you lose, it was, if it's even and there's a choice to be made, the white person is going to get the benefit of the doubt. Now, under affirmative action, there's been a switcheroo. Oftentimes, it's the black person who gets the benefit of the doubt, but I'm still in a situation in which
I have to work hard.
Yes, to avoid the stigmatization that is imposed by affirmative action. But is that stigma there? Yes, it's there. It is there. I'll tell you another way in which it comes up from a student's point of view. I'll never forget this. It was in my second year of law school. It was in tax class. We had a very famous tax teacher, wonderful tax teacher. On the very first day of class, Professor Bitker, wonderful man, wonderful teacher, Boris Bitker, called on, the very first person he called on was a black student. I remember this as if it were yesterday. Called on a black student, and it was a black woman student. And I remember when he called on her, I remember just, I felt as if the room got quieter. Really, I felt as if the room got quieter, and I know there was a real tenseness within me. He didn't call on me because he was calling on somebody else. It was a black woman student. And I felt different. I felt as if I was somehow at issue. I felt as if my place, I felt as if my status was, to some small degree at issue.
In the positive direction or the negative?
Just at issue.
At issue.
And so now all of this is happening really quickly. He calls on the student. This is, happening like in seconds.
Yeah.
And she responded, and she responded really strongly. It was clear he asked her a question. She answered the question. She answered the question, beautiful. I mean, very strong, comprehensive, wonderful response. Now you might say, okay, well, smart student. Okay, fine. Next. After class, I went up to her, and I clearly remember this. I said, "That was great. Thank you." Why? Because I'm a black student, predominantly white institution, Yale Law School, and I felt some of the, again, affirmative action. I felt some of the burden of this affirmative action stigma.
So it was almost like a thank you for showing that we belong here.
Yes. Perfect. Boom. Yes, that's exactly what the situation. And by the way, I wasn't the only one. I wasn't being idiosyncratic. I wasn't the only one. There weren't many black people in that class, but all of us. Mm-hmm. And we laughed about it later.
Yeah.
We laughed about it, but that was there. So there's the stigma issue. And some people have made a lot of this. Some people have really made a lot of the stigma issue. My attitude towards the stigma issue, yeah, it's there. It's, again, it's part of, it's part of the situation, but I think that the benefits outweigh the burdens. But is that a burden? Yeah, that's a burden. What are some others? Resentment. Yeah. Resentment in society. And that's so in the fancy schools. And by the way, remember when we're talking about affirmative action, most colleges and universities in the United States, there is no affirmative action issue because they're not selective. Hell, they'll take anybody who, if you can pay, come on in. It's only a fairly small set of schools that are selective. But of course, those are the most elite schools. Those are the schools that people most want to get into. And that's one of the reasons why we have all this, fighting over those schools. Now, there's a whole, how many millions of people are there in America who have applied to various places? They didn't get in. And what do they say? The white person who applied to Harvard, applied to Yale, applied to Columbia, applied to Georgetown, applied to NYU, you could go, didn't get in. What do they say? I would have gotten in if it hadn't been for that racial affirmative action. They're resentful. Well, should they be resentful? No, they shouldn't be resentful, but they are resentful. Does that have a consequence? Yeah, it has a consequence. It has a consequence on how they act towards other people. It has a consequence on how they vote. It has a consequence. And, that's something. Are there other things? Yeah, and in my book, I have I go through various. I think that there is a. I think that there is a certain sort of denialism that has accompanied the affirmative action debate. So, because Black people like myself want to avoid the stigmatizing burden of affirmative action, there's some people who, to deal with that, have said, oh, actually, there is no difference between, the beneficiaries of affirmative action and the other kids. There is no difference. If the affirmative action kids got, let's say, a 500 and the other kids got a 750, that doesn't make any difference. That's just BS. The only reason the kid who, the 550 kid didn't get 750 is because the test asks all sorts of, culturally biased things like, what is a yacht?
Mm-hmm.
Well, sorry. Yes, there is a difference. There's a 200-point difference. Does the difference matter? Yes, the difference matters. And by the way, if you don't know what a yacht is, you can know what a yacht is without owning a yacht, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And there's this denialism that I think has really seeped into not just into various conversations.
That can have a slippery slope effect that's beyond just this.
Yes. And, we see it in various ways. So, this attack on testing. It's not like I'm holding some tests are not good tests. I think we should be skeptical of everything. But there are a lot of tests that, yeah, they tell us something, all right. They tell us who knows what. And there's some people who are really, dead set against testing because they're dead set against anything that might show a gap.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think, by the way, are there gaps? Yeah, there are gaps. And what we need to do is be cognizant of those gaps and do things to make it so that if there's a gap, if you're deficient, no shame in being deficient. Heck, I'm deficient about a lot of things. Let's learn so that I catch up. But but I think sometimes there have been people who've been afraid of even acknowledging the gaps.
Of course, there's I guess a colleague of yours, Michael Sandel, with Tyranny and Merit. There's interesting, rigorous ways to kind of challenge ways. On the flip side of that, where obsessing with merit can go wrong, also.
Yes, you mentioned Michael Sandel. He's a wonderful colleague and he's a wonderful friend. I've known him a long time. I think he makes very important arguments about meritocracy. I disagree with some of the points that he makes about meritocracy.
So you lean towards the importance of meritocracy.
I think that yes, I think that there are values in meritocracy extremely important. That in fact, the movement from feudalism, the movement from status, the idea of I don't care who your father or mother was. I don't care from what part of town you come from. I don't care what your last name is. I don't care what your color of your skin is. Show me what you can do.
Mm-hmm.
And then somebody sits down. Okay, I'll show you what you can do. What I can do, and they show it. You're in.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot to that, and the impulse, the sentiments behind that. I resonate with that. I think that there's a lot there. What I want to do is I want to get rid of those features in society that deprive people of the what you need to develop yourself. Sometimes those are psychological. Sometimes it's, you're not around people who've done things that give you the idea that you can do things. I want to get rid of that. But the idea of, people, the idea, by the way, of, distinguishing, this is excellent. And the people who are excellent, they're here. And then there are people who are good. Are they excellent? No, they're not excellent. They're good. I'm not gonna, close my eyes to that distinction.
And highlight that distinction, and yet at the same time maintain a sense that their basic worth as a human being is equal.
Yes. So, was it Run DMC, one of the rap groups? No, we're all written down on the same list.
Yeah.
We're all written down on the same list. Yes, we're, so I want to recognize our fundamental humanity. I don't think I think that one can recognize our fundamental humanity, and one can also recognize, as far as I'm concerned, that we all collectively should make sure that we do all that we can to prevent people from sinking below a certain level and being, in misery. I'm, all for that. But I want to be careful about some of the attacks that I hear on meritocracy. So some of the people, including, again, I have all the respect in the world for Michael Sandel. He talks about the arrogance of the winners.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I want to be, I don't want the winners to be arrogant. That's right. Luck has a lot to do with things. You didn't have any control over the circumstances in which you were born into. You were lucky that you were born healthy and that you were born with a well-working mind. You didn't have anything to do with that. That was pure luck. There's some people who don't have that luck. So don't be, Mr. Big Stuff. Okay? So I'm against that sort of arrogance. I'm entitled, as if I taught myself how to read. No, you didn't teach yourself how to read. There was people who did all sorts of things for you and you don't even know it. Okay, so, I want to, get rid of the arrogance, have decent humility. I'm all for that. At the same time, I want to be careful about the problem of envy. I want to be careful about the problem of resentment. I want to be careful about, I've heard, so let's not give a trophy to the person who wins the race, because to give a trophy to the person who wins the race will make the person who they defeated feel bad. No, I don't want that. I want to give a trophy to the person who wins the race, because I think it's a good thing to valorize the best.
Yeah, it's a kind of celebration of this whole human project that we're on.
Yes,
is celebrating the best.